Well, happy Mother's Day. How many of you have a mother? If you are here, let me tell you, you for certain had a mother. Whether she was in your life long or not, you have a mother. Basically, it means everybody raise your hand. But this isn't just about mothers today. Not just about mothers today. But as we were praising and just coming before the Lord in worship, by the time we get to the end of the service, there's going to be some prayer warriors to come up and pray with you. And the Lord just said, He wants to do some things in hearts today. Some of us are going to walk in forgiveness towards mothers. Some of us have struggled to know how to be a mother because we haven't been able to release some of the things from our own mothers to be able to be the mothers that God's called us to be, to know how to be the mothers God's called us to be. And that's for sons and daughters, right? So today, this message, did the slides work out? Maybe, maybe not. Well, I titled this, Moses, Mamas, and Murder. Actually, it was first written as Moses, Mamas, and Mascara. And I was like, I don't know how mascara fits into this at all. I'm just going to buy a couple of tubes of mascara, and I'll just throw it out for whoever, who's the lucky, Benjamin caught that mascara, So I was like, Lord, that's not right. This is Moses, Mamas, and Murder. Did anybody murder children this morning? So that's not why it's murder in there, is it? But because this is Mother's Day, I just wanted to congratulate you all that your children will not have any bad attitudes. The babies will not have any blowouts. Everything will go perfectly well. You won't have to cook or work. You won't even sweat today. Because that's how perfect everything is on Mother's Day, right? Never. Never. Not yet. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll have. I brought slides. I worked really hard on getting slides, and then I got here and forgot them in my bag. They're in my bag, but I didn't get them to the sound booth, and so I don't know what I'm putting them through. So I'm so sorry. Oh, yes, 2 announcements before I go any further. There was a cell phone found in the parking lot. If you find that your phone is missing, check with the sound booth. Also, if you were here Wednesday night, you were blessed to hear Jake and Pendleton, and maybe you ordered a book, the Limitless book, and they were hoping to be here by today, and they are not. There is a delay. So look for those next Sunday if you're one that got one of those books. I'm excited to read that book. So let me give a little backstory here. Our story today, this is different. We're just going to kind of look at this story, kind of live through this story a little bit. And I apologize that we did not have donuts this morning. We do now? Yeah. Shh, don't tell anybody. Shh. That was a special Mother's Day surprise. And, well, I was going to say, since we didn't have donuts, I was going to let you out extra early, but forget that. That's like license to go. But some backstory. This comes out of Exodus. Starts off Exodus 1, really gets deep in Exodus 2, but we also find this story in Acts and in Hebrews. That's kind of important when you find that brought up again in the Word and brought up again in the Word. But the backstory is, how many of you know who Joseph was? Joseph, he was taken, he was sold, right, by his brothers, and ended up in Egypt. And the Lord brought him out of prison miraculously, right? And he was known as a prince in Egypt. And God gave him understanding, gave him foreknowledge of what was going to happen. He interpreted those dreams, gave him interpretations, and they were able to save up for the famine that came to Egypt, and they were able to feed the people. They were able to even feed Joseph's family. So his family moved to Egypt, and they didn't die in the famine that was so great in the land. But now the years have gone by, and the Pharaoh that knew Joseph is gone. He's dead. And the Pharaoh that is now ruling sees that the Israelites are so many. They have multiplied so greatly, and he fears war. If war were to break out with his enemies, the Israelites might join them, and surely Egypt would be defeated. So what should we do? Well, let's put taskmasters over the Israelites and give them heavy burdens. That should limit them, right? That should kind of break them down. What happened? They grew stronger. They multiplied more. The Egyptians were many. So at this point, he decides to reduce them to severe slavery. Says that their life was made cruel. Then he went to their midwives, and he said, every male baby that's born, I want you to kill it. Let the daughters may live, but every male, I want you to kill it. Says that the midwives feared God. And when they came and said, what is this? We still see all of these Hebrew baby boys. The midwife said, oops. The Egyptian women, or the Israelite women, are not like the Egyptian women. They are strong, and they have their babies before we even get there. Oops. So he turned to all his people. He turned to not just soldiers. He turned to the Egyptian people, and he said, gave them license that any Egyptian baby boy was to be thrown in the Nile River. And this is the first place murders entered into our story. What a hard time. What a hard time to be expecting a baby, right? Can you imagine the nervousness of wondering, is this a daughter? Is this a son? Can you imagine the trauma of that community? Can you imagine the feelings toward the Egyptians, the suspicion toward every Egyptian you would see? Sometimes we take these stories and we just read through them, but just wait a minute. Just wait a minute. So this is where we pick up the story of Amram. Do you know Moses' mom's name? Jochebed. Jochebed. I was calling her Betty this week. Jochebed, just Betty. Amram and Jochebed. She'd had other children, but it wasn't like this when she was carrying the other babies. Oh, you guys are amazing. A story of God's faithfulness. The murder is just for you guys. That's for the guys here. So Amram and Jochebed are expecting a baby. She gives birth, and it's a beautiful baby boy. Some scriptures say that like this baby was marked by God, like a beautiful baby. Made me think about later, we know Moses, his face shone with the glory of God. I kind of wondered, Lord, was there anything like that when he was born? It's pretty interesting to look at Acts, look at Exodus. So they see that he's beautiful. And if you go to the next slide, it says that prompted by faith, they hid him for 3 months. He was concealed for 3 months by his parents because they saw how comely the child was, and they were not overawed. They were not terrified by the king's decree. That's what faith does. Faith puts something inside of you than what the enemy's fear wants to put. Faith moves you in a different direction than what the flood of fear wants to shove you into. So, Acts 7:20, at this juncture, Moses was born and was exceedingly beautiful in God's sight. What does that mean? What did that look like? I want to ask God one of these days. For 3 months, he was nurtured in his father's house. Can you imagine that bonding? Can you imagine that risk? Every day that you're just keeping this treasure safe, hidden, and knowing that any day, if someone were to find out, the trauma of that baby. It was trauma at the very beginning if they found out when he was born, but now we're going 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. But you know what? Don't underestimate the confidence of faith either. Imagine the jealousy of the women around her. Can you imagine the doubts and the fears that were spoken to her? Can you imagine how ridiculous she looked? Who wouldn't want to try and save their baby? How many of them wish that they'd tried and done that too? 3 whole months she has him, hidden and nurturing him. Imagine the stories she knew of her friends' losses and horrors. Have any of you ever felt like there was evil that wanted your children? You ever felt that? How do I protect them? What do I do? How do I cover them? How many of you know the stories of others' children, the heartache and the heartbreak that they've experienced of what's happened to their kids? How many have heard the whispers of fear saying, something's going to happen to your kids, right? Keep in mind that the Israelites had been slaves for 400 years. 400 years. When's the last time we have any record of God breaking in and speaking? Jochebed didn't see that she was doing anything that was going to be spoken about in 2023. She's just raw, doing what faith has stirred in her heart. When God gives you faith in Jochebed, it's that God has a plan and I have a part. Can you say that with me? God has a plan and I have a part. Say it again. God has a plan and I have a part. Jochebed has no idea at this point. It's such a small seed of faith, but it's been pretty mighty in what she stepped out and been brave to do. Hebrews 11:23 that we were looking at, she is not overawed and terrified by the king's decree. This was not an act of fear. This was an obedience of faith. There is a big difference. Mamas, you know there's a big difference. The acts of fear are the obedience of faith. There's a difference in the heart. Maybe some of you want that difference. So I don't know if I've ever parented outside of that force of fear and the obedience of faith. We're going to see some more as we go through this. Day and night, she trusted for God's help. I love the 3-month-old babies because they start coming alive. They start jabbering and like they see you. I have pictures. I didn't have video like we can now. I have pictures of Anna in this bassinet that we kept by our bed until they got about 3 months. And at 3 months, it was getting to where you realize, it's not safe in the bassinet anymore, because she'd wake up and her head would pop up above the bassinet edge, and she would just start talking, just It was like, so I'm sitting there taking pictures, and all you see is this bald head. Some of the times it was just the back of the head, and I'm like, oh, that's so cute. And now we have all this video and footage of babies, oh, look, they blew a spit bubble. I don't have any of that. I couldn't catch it fast enough with the camera. And I see those pictures, though, and I can still hear the noises of like, oh, they're just coming alive. Benjamin was our first baby, and it's all so new, and when they start talking like that, you're just like, this is the smartest baby ever. I think he's even talking early. I don't think other babies have ever talked this early. We used to tell him that all the time. You are so smart. You are so smart. Then he started talking for real, and he'd go, I am so smart. And we're like, okay now, buddy. Just, you're whittle. Yes, you're so smart. Yes, you are. Then he got older, and I'm like, stay off my level. I said that a lot, didn't I? I said that last week. No, I didn't. I didn't. Did I? I don't think so. I think it's been a little while. So this baby's waking up, coming alive, getting noisy. How is she going to hide this baby now, right? So she hasn't gotten this far without spending time just before the Lord. Lord, what do I do? I need your help. So we go to that next slide, Exodus 2, 3 through 9. Wow, she got an idea. I'm going to build a waterproof basket. That's kind of not the idea that I would think. Wow, can you imagine her friends? She's building a waterproof basket, and that's the plan. She's going to put the baby in a waterproof basket out on the river, out on the very river that was meant for his death. That's weird. That's a surprise. We know the story so well, but we can sometimes just don't stop and go, what? You're going to put the baby in a basket on the Nile? But that's what she does. Imagine the imaginations that won in her mind. She placed his sister out there to watch, to learn what would happen. I'll read this real quick for you. When she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark or basket made of bulrushes or papyrus, making it watertight by dabbing it with bitumen and pitch. Then she put the child in it, which bitumen and pitch, did you know that was what Noah used with the ark? Isn't that cool? Then she put the child in it and laid it among the rushes by the brink of the river Nile. And his sister Miriam stood some distance away to learn what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh, actually I'm going to stop right there a minute, because you know what? Some of you are Miriams. Some of you have been like the dreams of your heart to be a mother, and you've been a Miriam and not even realized it. That you have been watching over others' children. You have been wisely watching. You speak up with wisdom, which Miriam does here in just a little bit, but you know the story. Did you know the plan on Moses' life? If Miriam wasn't there, this would have been a totally different story. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the bank. She saw the ark among the rushes and sent her maid to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the baby cried. And she took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, she just stepped out and spoke up, "Shall I go and call a nurse for the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. If Miriam had not been there, what would the story look like? Miriam knew the exact nurse to get for that baby, didn't she? Can you imagine Jochebed's joy? Not only is she being ordered by Pharaoh's daughter to take her own baby home and nurse her, she's getting paid for it. Wow. Paid from the riches of the Pharaoh who ordered this baby to be killed. She's now being paid to take care of her own baby. Guys, this is the amazement of what faith does. Don't underestimate the small, weird steps that faith, God puts that in you and he says, do this, and you're like, oh, I get these weird ideas sometimes. No, step out and obey what God puts in your heart because you have no idea all the pieces that God has in place. We miss those when we don't step out. When God says, step here, and fear's like shoving us, we miss the next step that God had, the next step that God had, the things that we don't even imagine. He says that, right? More than you can imagine. And it was just the first step of hiding that baby. Have you ever felt that your plans, that the things in your heart were futile? That those small steps that you saw for whatever it is, for your children, for whatever, that it's ridiculous, foolish? How many women told Jochebed that basket was crazy talk? That's just crazy, lady. Yeah. When she put that basket out there on the river, how out of control did she feel? Can you imagine walking away, putting that baby there on the river, just leaving your daughter going, hey, would you watch? Just let me know what happens. Did she go home to be on her face before the Lord? That's where I would be. Can you imagine letting go of that control, the knowing that you can't do anything about what happens at this point? Can you imagine the trust? There was, you know, all the seasons of parenthood. If you're a mom, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a human, you know what I'm talking about. But I remember different things coming up with our kids and just, you know, seeing the desire of the enemy for their lives. You could see it real easy. I could see it sometimes easier than I could see the promises of God over their lives. And so, man, you know, I'd go to praying. I'm coming against the enemy, you know, and I'm just like praying protection over them, that nothing's going to hurt them. And I couldn't go to sleep sometimes because it'd be all stirred up inside of me, you know. And the Lord, I've mentioned this before, I know I have, but the Lord, I was reading a book on intercession, and the Lord turned something for me. And I realized I'd been praying from a place of fear. What's the opposite of faith? Fear. Well, what am I doing? You know, one thing about fear, if you partner with fear, this is really deep, you might want to write this down. If you partner with fear, fear will be your partner. Fear would love to be your partner. What's the opposite of faith? Fear. What's the opposite of fear? Fear really wants to be your partner. Because the moment you step into walking in that faith, walking in what God is speaking about your children, I promise you things change. They don't know, but I do. God knows. And I started saying, Lord, what do you say about this one? And it just rises up in your spirit. I challenge you to do this. Go home and ask the Lord, what do you say about this kid of mine? And he'll tell you. And then you just step into going, I bless those plans that you have for my son. I bless the plans, Lord, that you have for my daughter. Lord, I thank you that you are faithful over their lives to bring it to pass. Lord, I thank you that you are greater than any plan of the enemy over my child. Lord, I thank you that you knit that child together before they were ever born, that you knew them before I did, and that you care more for them than I ever will, and that you are the one who is faithful to cover them and to be with them wherever they go, and I'm not. As I started blessing them, I could go just roll over and go to sleep, not because I didn't care, but because I never was the one in control. We never have been the ones in control, mamas. It's kind of like tithing. I feel like it's so much like tithing because it's like God says, give me 10%. And what does he do? He blesses all of it, right? That's what sometimes it feels like in parenting is like, Lord, I don't know if I do very well at any of this. And he's like, do what I tell you. Do that little step. It's like that 10% offering. And he blesses it, and he multiplies it. But he's asking us to give him something to bless. When we stay in fear, we hold on to all of it. We want to manage it all and control it all and handle it all ourselves. Well, when we give it to him, even in the places where we trip, you give it to him and you've given him something to bless. So Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, discovers the baby. Can you imagine how all of her risk, all of her sacrifice felt worth every bit for those whole 3 months? It was huge. In Exodus 2, verse 10, the child grew, and Jochebed brought him. You can go to that next slide. She brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. And he became her son. And she called him Moses, for she said, because I drew him out of the water. In Acts. Well, actually, before I read that next verse up there, I was digging and reading different history on this. And I read a rabbi that said that Jochebed had actually named him Yekudiel, meaning hope, because she had hope and trust in God that he would return Moses to her. And in Acts, when Moses had been exposed to perish, the daughter of Pharaoh rescued him and took him and reared him as her own son. So Moses was educated in all the wisdom and culture of the Egyptians, and he was mighty, powerful in his speech and deeds. Man, can you imagine Jochebed when your baby's given a different name? Drawn out of the water. This is about God being faithful. This is about trusting God that he's actually alive. And she had to trust God right there. Right here's a spot too. Some of you are like Pharaoh's daughter. Some of you have taken children that you didn't bear and you've brought them and nurtured them as your own. Nurturing, that's something that God put in our hearts, isn't it, ladies? This mama wasn't a mama in a natural sense to Moses, but she became a mama to Moses. She saw the treasure that he was, and she took him in. She had compassion on him. She took him in and she raised him, gave him the very best. Who would Moses be without Pharaoh's daughter in his life? Jochebed Jochebed, can you imagine? It was like she just handed her baby over to the enemy from whom she had hid him all that time before, and now she's come to the day that she's got to take him and hand him over to Pharaoh's daughter. This baby's going to go live probably in the palace with Pharaoh, the one who had ordered this baby to even be murdered at the beginning. Can you imagine? Can you imagine turning around and going back home after you just let go of your baby again? Guys, the trust, the calling on Moses' life happened so early. You don't know the callings on your children's lives, but God does. God knows it far before we ever even imagine the slightest hope of what this baby could be, how God would use this baby. What did she risk so much for when he was only going to go and become one of them? Would he even remember the truth that she had taught his young heart? She maybe had 3 years, maybe about 3 years with him. That'd be pretty typical. We don't know. It says that Moses was educated in all wisdom and culture of the Egyptians. How many are familiar with the historian Josephus? Have you ever heard of Josephus? He's a historian. It's really cool. I have not read his whole book. It's a very thick one. But it's a great resource to even go back and look. Josephus, and after I read this, I went back and did some more digging on my own. This is so interesting. Did you know Pharaoh didn't have a son at this point? He had a daughter, possibly a second daughter, but no son. And it says that Moses was taken and groomed to be the next king of Egypt. Can you imagine? I don't know if Jochebed would be excited to think about that or not. Maybe hopeful, maybe terrified. They've gotten him since he was little, and now he's being taught. Is he going to be taught about God? No, he's not going to be taught about God. He's going to be he's going to be trained about the idols. They served the sun god. It was evil. The practices were horrible. He's going to learn all of the things of being a leader. Why would God want him to learn all the things of being a leader? He's educated in all of the things that he would need to know to be the next Pharaoh. So then go to the next slide. There's Acts 7:23 through 25. You guys okay with this story time? Okay. Okay. Good deal. Someone's at home cooking for Mama, so I'll try and hurry. When he was in his 40th year, it came into his heart to visit his kinsmen, the children of Israel, to help them and to care. Oh, hey, wait, back up just a minute. How old was he? 40. Like 40. 40 before he's like, hey, something's coming to my heart. I wonder where I came from. I want to go see them. 40, guys. Think about Jochebed again for a minute here. 40 years he's been raised as an Egyptian. 40 years. Well, let's pretend she's still here, okay? But in his heart, he wanted to visit his kinsmen to help them and to care for them. And on seeing one of them being unjustly treated, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian and slaying him. That would be murder. But murdered. Didn't she want to save him from that? Wasn't that the very thing that was after all the babies that she's rescuing him from, and now he is the murderer? He expected his brethren to understand that God was granting them deliverance by his hand, taking it for granted that they would accept him. I see that. Ta-da! Here I am! Not yet, buddy. You're a little raw. He's been the prize in the castle, being raised as this is the next great Pharaoh, right? And so now he's got it in his heart. He cares for his people, and here I am, great and mighty. I'll be your deliverer. But they did not understand. The next, Exodus 2:11 through 15. One day after Moses was grown, it happened that he went out to his brethren and looked at their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of Moses' brethren. He looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Those are kind of extra details that make it a little more obvious. He went out the second day, and he saw two Hebrew men quarreling and fighting, and he said to the unjust aggressor, "Why are you striking your comrade, your brethren?" And the man said, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely this thing is known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh's presence and took refuge in the land of Midian. Okay. We never actually hear about Jochebed again in the rest of Moses' story. But let's imagine for a minute what she knows of her son. We'll just stop the Prince of Egypt movie right here, okay? He was given a foreign name. He was educated and groomed in Egyptian ways, wisdom, and culture. He was their prize. He's a man. He's a man, and he's a murderer now. Maybe that's the fruit of how he was taught. Was that what the Egyptians did to him? You know, can you imagine that mama going, "Oh, that's not my baby. That's not what I taught him. That's not what's in his heart." Well, what happened? What was put in his heart? He's a fugitive. He's fled. He's gone forever. She looked like a fool and a failure. What about all the women who lost their babies? Was this better? What Jochebed was experiencing now, was this better than the mamas who lost their babies at the very beginning? Had this been of any benefit at all? The prayers, the risk, the sacrifice. I guess she had money. Was that what she was after? No. Did she birth a son for the Egyptians? But Moses' story that Jochebed may never have known. Go to that next one, Hebrews 11:24 through 27. It says, aroused by faith, Moses, let me stop right there. At the very beginning, we read that prompted by faith, Moses, after his birth, was kept concealed for 3 months, right? Right? Okay, so now we have Moses. Aroused by faith, Moses, by the way, what Bible version is this? Anybody guess? Guys, this is the Amplified. If you don't have one, you should really get one, okay? Because if you're not, it would just say by faith. Guys, Moses was aroused by faith. Well, his mama was prompted by faith. I like knowing that. Okay, so just a little amplified plug, or you guys would be disappointed with me. Aroused by faith, Moses, when he had grown to maturity and become great, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter because he preferred, what? He preferred to share the oppression, suffer the hardships, and bear the shame of the people of God, rather than to have the fleeting enjoyment of a sinful life. What? Now, okay, he's 40. How many of you have trees in your yard that have been budding out with leaves all over them. How many of you have a walnut tree? Does your walnut tree have leaves yet? Just now. And the red buds aren't even red anymore. I kind of felt like this when I was reading that. This is kind of like Moses is like a walnut tree. He's 40 years old before it rises in his heart to come and see what his brethren are doing. And he's like, you know what? No, this life is not for me. I kind of feel like he's a little bit of the late bloomer tree. He's 40 years old before he goes, I wonder what my roots are like. I wonder what's going on. But stirred by faith, he would rather bear the shame of the people of God than to have the fleeting enjoyment of a sinful life. He considered the contempt and abuse and shame borne for the Christ, the Messiah who was to come, to be greater wealth than all the treasures of Egypt. For he looked forward and away to the reward. Motivated by faith, he left Egypt behind, being unawed and undismayed by the wrath of the king, for he never flinched, but held staunchly to his purpose and endured steadfastly as one who gazed on him who is invisible. Who else was unawed and undismayed by the king? Jochebed. His parents, they were unawed and unterrified by the threat to kill those babies, and they were going to obey that faith that stirred in their hearts to hide away their baby. Is in his DNA, guys. Even seeing that Israelite being abused by the Egyptian, it raised up in his heart that was injustice. He's going to do the right thing. In Exodus 16, 2:16, not 16, Exodus 2:16. This is after Moses fled, and he goes hundreds of miles away, hundreds of miles to Midian, and he arrives and he sits down at a well. And there's the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. Doesn't seem to be that he had any sons. So his 7 daughters were the shepherds of what's his name? Jethro. They were the shepherds for their father Jethro, right? And so he sits down at this well, and then here comes these 7 shepherdesses. And they're going to get some water from the well for their sheep. Moses is watching this. And the shepherds came and drove them away. What does Moses do? He stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when the girls came home to Jethro, their father, he said, "How is it that you have come so soon today?" They said, what did they say? A what? Is he an Egyptian? We know he's not. What did he look like? He looked like an Egyptian. But an Egyptian delivered us from the shepherds. Also, he drew water for us and watered the flock. Jethro said to his daughters, "Where is he? Why have you left the man?" Why have you left the man? But look at it again. It's in his DNA. This is like the faith of his mother that rises up to do what no one else has done before. This has got to stop. And you know what? Here I am. Look at 2 Timothy 1:5. Paul is talking to Timothy, and he says, "I am calling up memories of your sincere and unqualified faith, the leaning of your entire personality on God, in Christ, in absolute trust and confidence in his power, wisdom, and goodness." And you thought faith was just a little thing? Guys, this is really big. Faith, the leaning of your entire personality on God. This is part of what's so great about the Amplified Bible. Well, I don't know what's so great about this faith. Oh, no, it's the leaning of your entire personality. Your personality and your personality and your personality and your personality. What does that look like? Entirely leaning on God. in Christ, in absolute trust and confidence in his power, wisdom, and goodness. Paul says it's a faith that lived first and permanently in the heart of your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am fully persuaded dwells in you also. That's the kind of mamas we're to be. That's God's kind of mamas. That's the kind of mama Jochebed was. She planted things in Moses, and those seeds grew. He was a walnut tree. They didn't really start showing leaves until he was 40, but she planted those seeds a long time ago, even when he was little, and you think they'll never remember. It won't really matter. Well, I did something good here, but I messed up here. Listen, these are still seeds of faith that God's going to water and grow because he's the one that's faithful over your children. He's the one that's been faithful over our own lives, Mama, and he's the one that's going to be faithful over your children. Plant the seeds no matter how ridiculous or futile or small or insignificant they seem, because some of those are going to be maybe some beautiful early bloomers that are like, wow, you look over there and you're like, wow, she really did it right. Look how beautiful her tree is, like a red bud early in the spring, and everybody's taking pictures of it. Everybody's buying more trees like that because they want to do just what she did, so they have that kind of family tree, right? And all I have is a walnut tree that just looks like a bunch of sticks still. Plant the seeds. Be faithful to plant the seeds. Listen, God gives you crazy ideas. There was a season in my kids' life, don't ask him if this was a good idea or not. Okay, just listen to my message and don't ask them. No, I'm teasing. You can ask them. There was so much tattling going on in our household. The tattling was getting ridiculous to where you'd hear, Mom, and you're just like, I'm not even here, right? You know? And they'd say, they did this. They looked at me with a weird eye. You know, that was just... So I'm like, Lord, I don't know what to do. I got this idea. I thought this idea was like going to go down and like be the thing that they're like, well, in our family, this is what we do. So what we did was, guys, what's all the things you'd like to do? Oh, go to the zoo? Okay. Let's write this on a piece of paper and put it in this jar. Oh, you want to go to the park? We'll put that on the... we can even go to the library, you know. I think that was my idea, not theirs. And I put that in the jar. Had all these ideas in the jar, right, guys? They're like looking at me like, what in the world are you talking about? And so I said, every time you come and tell me something good that one of your siblings has done for you, I got this board on the wall, and I'm like, I'm going to put a mark on this board. And when you get, I don't know, was it 10? They're looking at me like they don't even know they weren't even my kids. But I think it was 10. If you get 10 marks, then you get to draw a paper out of this jar, and we'll go do whatever that wonderful thing is. Maybe we'll make cookies, you know? And it got really ridiculous. Because they would be like, Mom, he straightened the pillow on my bed. Are you going to put a mark by my name? Do you remember this at all? Yes, in the pantry, the whiteboard. What? There wasn't a reverse. No, it didn't get wiped away. It didn't get wiped. I was just trying to promote something other than tattling, right? Yes? For those of you that couldn't hear, Benjamin, the oldest, would go in there and wipe them away. If she tattled, then apparently, see, this is why I would say, get off my level. That was where I would say that right then, right there, like, So this wonderful idea I had, you know, it didn't really fly very well. But can I tell you, it broke a stronghold of tattling. Like there was a shift, this miraculous huge shift that you won't believe. No, it wasn't that amazing. But it shifted something in our household that wasn't this the mind-numbing. Who knows about the mind-numbing tattling, whining? It is a thing. And sometimes when you hear ladies saying, I just want a baby, you're like, oh, bless your heart. Oh, yes, it's going to be wonderful. Like nothing you've ever imagined. But God will give you ideas and you step out and do it. That thing didn't last very long. That was not a very long-lived idea. But do those things. Do it. That's your 10% that gives God something to bless. Find your own weird things that God puts in your heart for your special family. And I'm actually serious about that.
Good word.
God's the faithful one, right? But if we do nothing, we've planted no seeds. Oh, guys. Oh, when he went to Midian, Jethro gave him his oldest daughter as his wife. And he lived there in Midian for 40 years. But you know what he did there? He became a shepherd. Huh. Did God use that in his life too? You know, we can look at these pieces and go, well, like this whole life story looks like just, oh no, he's taken by Pharaoh's daughter. Oh no, he's trained in the ways of the Egyptians. Oh no, now he's fled, he's a fugitive. Oh no, he's hundreds of miles away. And God, in every season, was putting things in him. He didn't waste a bit of those seasons. This is the last verse of our story in Acts. Chapter 7, 35 through 38. It was this very Moses whom they had denied, the Israelites, had denied, disowned, and rejected, saying, who made you our ruler, referee, and judge? Whom God sent to be a deliverer, a ruler and deliverer and redeemer, by and with the protecting and helping hand of the angel that appeared to him in the bramble bush. He it was who led them forth, having worked wonders and signs in Egypt and at the Red Sea, and during the 40 years in the wilderness. How long was there in the wilderness? Maybe that was Moses' fault, guys. I mean, I know the Israelites murmured and they complained, and that was, I know the story. But I'm also looking at Moses in 40, and then 40 again. And your leader is now Moses, and you will be in the wilderness for 40 years. I'm just saying, I don't know. It was this very Moses who said to the children of Israel, God will raise up for you a prophet from among your brethren, as he raised me up. Who's Moses referring to? Jesus. That's why the Bible writes it prophet with a capital P, right? This is he, Moses, in the assembly in the wilderness, in the desert, was the go-between for the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai and our forefathers. Moses. We know the story of Moses, but man, do we know the story of Moses? And he received living oracles, words that still live, to be handed down to us. What are those words called? The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. You know what? One of those 10 Commandments, you know, it says, thou shalt not murder. Man, what do you think Moses had to deal with in his heart before the Lord on that? How am I going to tell these people something I'm guilty of myself? Well, you don't just bury it. No, that God doesn't do that. God doesn't kill somebody and put him in the sand. No, it's where you come to the Lord and you're like, all right, God, I'm guilty here. Would you forgive me? Even Moses, he couldn't hand it to the people without having it worked in his own heart. All right, so this is the end of our story. I want to look at Romans chapter 8, verse 28. What version is this? Amplified. You guys know this scripture by heart, but not when I read it to you like this. And this is not heresy. You right there. We are assured, and we know that God, being a partner in their labor, I said this is not heresy. That God, we know that all things work together and are fitting into a plan for good to and for those who love God and are called according to his design and purpose. So what the Amplified does is it goes into the Greek and Hebrew. What is it? A little bit of body text. Okay, everybody, let's do what it says. Pastor Sean can do this so much better than me. You know, I can't even do it. I got a microphone. I had a little bit of body text. That's hilarious. That is heresy, that part there. But look at this. We are assured and know that God being a partner in their labor. The Amplified takes the Greek or the Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek. And it takes those words, and it doesn't just give you a single word. It expounds on what the meaning of that is right there. And in our other translations, we'll try and reduce it down to one word as best we can. A lot of times it's a word that in our English language is a phrase. And I have seen this for a while, and I've just been excited about this. That the footnote says, God works all things with them. And I want you to look at the story we just went through and how much of that we saw. That God, Jochebed was never on her own. She never was just a mom winging it out there. That God works together with those. And that's for mamas. That's for daddies, that's for men, that's for women, that's for children, that's for daughters, that's for sons, that's for all of us. Whatever it is that God has put in your heart to do, he's not expecting you to do it on your own. In fact, Jochebed means Yah makes great. What does Yah mean? Yahweh. Who made Jochebed great? God did. It was never about Jochebed. It was about God taking what she did in obedience and making it great. Jochebed, Yah makes great. Because you know what? Contrary to what's in our culture, I am not enough. You are not enough. Oh, don't say those words. Wow. You know what? You are not enough. We've never been enough. We have never been enough. Never. It is only through Christ. Through Christ, I can do all things. On my own? No. No, I'm a terrible mother on my own. I promise you. I'm not strong enough. I'm not wise enough. I'm not sensitive enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not skilled enough. None of those things. But just like Jochebed, it is Yah, Jehovah, Yahweh. He's the great. And he's the one that takes the seeds that you will be obedient to plant, and he will prosper those. He will put leaves on those walnut trees. It's his strength, it's his mercy, and his wisdom. The calling of Moses' life started with his parents. And I want to challenge you not to fear what your eyes see or your ears hear. Because there were seasons in Moses' life that if his mama didn't stay rooted in knowing who her God was over her babies, what did it look like? We looked at what it looked like. She looked like a foolish woman. But she had partnered with God for something bigger. And that's my challenge. Partner with God. Partner with God. Just as Jochebed, God has a plan and I have a part. Mamas, God has a plan and you have, daddies, God has a plan and you have a part. If you're a son or a daughter, I promise you, all of you are a son and a daughter. God has a plan and you have a part. He is faithful and he will show you. Find what God says about your family, what God says about your children, and bless those callings and purposes over their life. If you're a son and a daughter here today, and you have a mama who wasn't the mama that God would have wanted her to be, I encourage you. We're going to have prayer warriors Prayer warriors, in fact, if you would just start coming, whoever you are today. If you have things you want to get rid of that have been things in your life that have been wounds, hurts. When we were singing that song, your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. You know, we can't say that a lot of times about a lot of different people, even mamas. As much as God puts that love and nurturing in a mama's heart, sometimes you see mamas that they don't know how. They don't know how. Let God do a healing in that. If you're a son or a daughter that has things that you need to make right with the Lord in your life, so that God can cut you free from some of those family ties, those strongholds that have been in families for generations. As you forgive, God can cut those ties that have even held you back. A lot of times you see, in our years, we typically have seen things like you have an alcoholic father and a child who says, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to be like that. And then so often you see, oh my goodness, they're exactly like that. Well, there was forgiveness that needed to happen so that some of those ties, those things that were strongholds in their parents' life, when you don't forgive, you're holding on to those things. And when you hold on to things, they stay pretty close to you, don't you? Don't they? Well, when you forgive, you let go. And when you let go of those things, they're not right there with you, are they? Yeah. So whatever it is that God wants to do a work in us, Lord. Do a work in us that we can be the sons and the daughters that walk in your ways, Lord, that aren't holding on to hurts or wounds or things of unforgiveness towards people, Lord, that were totally imperfect like we are. Father, I ask that you would do a work in sons and daughters. I ask that you would do a work in mamas today, Lord. Father, with just even, if it's just even a little seed of hope to step out in faith to do what you've called them to do. Father, even the things that seem like that's ridiculous. That's not what my neighbor mama does. That's not what my superstar mama does. That looks different than anybody else. I've never read a book that said this is how you do it. Step out in obedience and do those things. Lord, I ask that you would just give mamas visions of ideas of what you want to show them how to love in ways they've never loved before. Oh, Father, I ask for great faith. I ask for faith to be stirred. Father, like how things bubble up. Like I got that picture of putting Mentos in Coke, you know? That bubbling up of hope. Things that are like, oh, okay, I'm going to step this way. I don't even know if this is a thing, but I'm going to step out. Father, I just thank you for hope. I thank you for faith. Father, I thank you for fruit. I thank you for the callings and the purposes on each and every one. And Father, I thank you for the fruit of those things. Yeah. Go ahead and stand. One last thing before I'll step down. Each of you with your mama in mind, whether she was great or really not great, whether she's still here or whether she's not here. This year, this year marks 10 years since my mom went to be with Jesus. If you ever get tired of shopping for Mother's Day cards, don't. But with your mama in mind, I want you to just take a moment. I want you to just thank the Lord for your mama. Without her, you know what? You wouldn't be here today. I want you to just bless your mamas. And it can sound something like, God, thank you for my mom. And whatever her life looks like, you know, I don't know your mamas. Lord, would you bless my mom today? If there's things you want to forgive her for, like I said, you can come up, get prayer. Okay, I'll be down over here. But if there's things you need to forgive her for, do it today. Don't carry it another day. Don't carry it another day. I tell you what, I haven't met the perfect mama yet. I really wanted to be it, and I really, really wasn't. So Lord, we just bless mamas today. And Lord, I ask for hearts to forgive mamas. Father, that we can walk in new ways, that we can walk in your ways. And Lord, I thank you for the Moseses, that you are faithful over the lives of our children, just like you were faithful over Moses. And Lord, I thank you for faith, stirring up deep, great faith in Jesus' name.